In 1.1, this is where we're going to actually start dealing with the math that we're going to test you on for Unit 1. And all the problems that we have in 1.0 or 1.1 deal with the words we had on the vocabulary worksheet, and then those equations that we were working on with 0.1 and 0.2 and how to solve an equation, that's going to show up again here as well. So every single problem that we have on worksheet 1 will either be a vertical angle, a complementary angle, a supplementary angle, or something along those lines to where you're going to have to solve and figure out what it is. Hopefully you remember that vertical angles are always congruent no matter what, meaning the opposite sides are always going to be equal to each other. I don't know if you've ever seen two lines, but no matter what the two lines look like, if I open or close it, the opposite sides are always the same. If you open it up a little bit, the opposite sides are still always the same. If you slide it, the opposite sides are still the opposite angles are still the same size. That's what we mean by vertical angles are always congruent. That means they're always equal to each other. Complementary angles always add to 90. Supplementary always adds to 180. So knowing that, that's how we're going to solve a lot of the problems. And the other thing that we need to know is that when we write the angles, we have to write an angle using 3 letters, side, then a vertex, then a side. Here's what I mean by that. If I say angle RID, we're talking about R, then I, then D. A side, then the vertex, then the other side. That's the only way to label this angle. You can't say angle I because we don't know which angle we're talking about, but when you give 3 letters, you now know the specific size angle that you are using. Let me get my pen out and make sure it's red. So let's go ahead and do some examples. Since you have worksheet 1 already, here's number 3. And number 3 says, is this true or false? Does the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 3 equal the measure of angle 2 plus the measure of angle 4? I want you to quickly discuss with the person you're sitting next to whether you think it is true or false. See what you and your partner think. Discuss, please.
Yeah, I do, because I think they're vertical angles, so I think they are equal to each other.
Class? Perfect. So you may have said true, you may have said false, but let's do this. This is how I think about it. If I know that this is angle 1, and angle 1 is a vertical angle to angle 3, and those are the same, what if I plugged in some numbers? What if I said angle 1 looks like it's about 50 degrees? That would make angle 3 50 degrees. And I'm just picking random number, not random, but it looks about 50 degrees. If that's 50 degrees and that's 50 degrees, then angle 2 must be around 130 degrees. Why? Because they're adjacent and they're supplementary, which means that angle 4 would have to be 130 degrees as well, because those would be a straight line. Now let's look at this. Angle 1 plus angle 3. How much does that make? Angle 2 plus angle 4. How much does that make? So, is this true or is this false now that we've plugged in some numbers? What do you say it's going to be? False. The sum of these two numbers does not equal the sum of those two numbers. Sometimes it's going to be true, sometimes it's going to be false, and your job is to see, okay, if I know that those are vertical, will that sum equal the sum of the other one? No matter what. And that's hard to say. The only time it would actually be true is if it was 90, 90, 90, 90. It's the only time it would be true, not always true. Okay? Next question is number 6. So you can go to number 6 on your worksheet number 1. Feel free to write this on there. This says angle, RID. This is the angle symbol, by the way. Every time you're writing an answer that is an angle, I will expect that you will write an angle symbol as well, because you're going to be speaking geometry. Angle RID is supplementary to, here's R, then I, then D. We're talking about this angle right there that I've highlighted in red with 4 arcs. RID is supplementary to, meaning it adds to a straight line. It's a linear pair with which angle, and we should use 3 letters. We need to use the angle symbol, and we need 3 letters that add up to the straight line. We have to have a side, then a vertex, then a side, otherwise it'll be incorrect. So we're going to pick, let me see, this angle plus another angle should equal a straight angle or be supplementary. I need this angle right here. I need a side, then a vertex, then a side. Do you know what your 3 letters will be? Hopefully you're thinking RIN. R, then I, then N. Angle RIN is side, vertex, side. The only other acceptable answer is angle NIR. The reason why I say that is because you can say this angle as RIN or NIR. You can go left to right or right to left with an angle. It doesn't matter. They're the same. But what you cannot do is change the letter on the inside. The vertex has to be the letter I. Going to number 13 is the next one I chose for you. When you look at 13, it says, what is the measure of angle COD? When you see a little m, it's asking for how many degrees, or how much is the length of. What is the length of angle COD? They're looking for side, vertex, side. They're looking for this one right here in red. I'll color it in. That's what they're looking for. Now they give you some information. They tell you that angle AOB is 40 degrees. They tell you that GOF is 60 degrees. And then they have this other one, angle DOF is, and they have this little box. Hopefully we know what that means. So I'm going to highlight this one right here. Let me switch my pen color to blue. From here to here. Because of that box, do you know how many degrees that is? So I'm going to write that. That might help me. And then, let me switch my pen color to green. Since this angle here, this green angle is 60 degrees, do you know what this green angle is going to be right there? How many degrees is this green angle going to be, or angle BOC going to be? Because it's a vertical angle. Now the whole reason why I do that is this. If I were to cover up part of this problem, I'm going to cover up that with a ruler, right? Let's get rid of it. Here's my straight line. I know how many degrees are in a straight line. You already told me that a straight angle is how many degrees? 180. You have that this is 60. You have the missing one you're trying to find. And then you have this 90 degrees. So now you kind of have almost all the parts except for that red part to see how much adds to 180. You could write that out as an equation if you wanted to. 60 plus, I don't know what this is, plus the 90 should equal 180. Do you know how much that red angle is? Just doing some math in your head? Ooh, a lot of you know. If that number is too big for you, use a calculator. Because 60 plus 90 is 150. And minus 150 is 30. And I agree with people who said that it's 30 degrees. 30 degrees. 60, 30 make 90, 90 and another 90 add up to 180 or a straight line. That's how you're going to solve all those questions. You might figure out that this is a vertical angle with that, and you might be able to subtract from 90 to figure out this angle and find out its vertical angle, and you can work your way around and find any answer to all those questions on number 13. The last thing that we wrote down in our notes was that really we're going to have to decide how two things are related. They will either be supplementary, which means they will add to 180 degrees, or they're going to be congruent, otherwise known as equal to each other. So in problems like 19 and so on, bless you, you're going to have to figure out how the x's are related to the other x's and how the y's are related to the other y's. I recommend, if you're dealing with an x, figure out where the other x is and find out how those two things are related to each other. So for number 19, this one is 13x, and the other x is here. This one is 4x plus 10. I want to ignore the y's and only figure out the x's first. And I have to figure out, are these supplementary or are they equal to each other? Are these equal to each other or are they supplementary? If you know, say it out loud. What are they? Those of you who said supplementary, you are correct. They add up to a straight line. They add up to 180 degrees. So what does that mean? I take this 4x plus 10 and I'm going to add it to 13x, and that should equal 180 degrees. That's how you're going to solve it. Sometimes the x's will be next to each other, meaning supplementary. Sometimes the x's will be across from each other, and vertical angles will be equal to each other. You have to decide. And then this is where that other worksheet's going to come into play. When they're on the same side of the equal sign, we just put them together. 13x and 4x. How many x's do we have? We have 17x. We put those two things together. Plus 10 equals 180. We subtract 10 from both sides, doing the opposite, just like we did on that other worksheet. And I feel like if you do everything correctly, all of these come out nice and even numbers. 170 divided by 17, can you do that in your head? How many times? Somebody can do it in their head. So x is 10 degrees. The questions here, though, they're not super hard, but the number one reason why Math 2 students miss this on the test is because they don't read the directions. Let's go back to the directions. Find the value of the variable. Did I find the value of x? Yes. And the measure of each angle in the diagram. This is the number one reason students miss this question. Is because students will do the math right, but forget, well, how big is this angle? If that's 10 and that's 13x, well, how big is the angle? Plug it back in and do 13 times 10, and then you'll know how big this angle is. Plugging it back in is super important. Which means if this is 130, I bet when we plug this 10 in and add that 10, this should be 50 degrees. And then I know vertical angles, these are going to be the same. And I know vertical angles, these are going to be the same. The only thing I have to figure out is what is y. And I could do the same thing where I said this plus this equals 180. Or since now that I know that this is 50 and this is 50, I could even do a separate equation here and take this, since it's equal to 50, and I could solve that. I can add 30. And I can do 2y is equal to 80. Just like that. And I've answered the question because I found every single angle, and I found x, and I found y. But if you want to make a note to yourself, the biggest note is don't forget to plug back in the angle, because that's where we miss questions on the test. The last example I have for you is number 23, and then I'm going to give you the rest of the time to work on the worksheet. If angle C and angle D are complementary, complete the following. So I'm hoping you know what that word means. Complementary means adds to. So that must mean that this angle plus this angle should equal 90 degrees. X plus 10 plus the 2x minus 7 should equal 90 degrees. Since they're on the same side, we just put them together. 1x plus 2x is 3x. The 10 and the 7 are on the same side. 10 take away 7 is 3. I subtract 3 from both sides because that's the opposite of adding 3. I can subtract 3. 3 minus 3 makes it go away because it makes it go to 0. That makes 87. And then we're going to divide by 3. That's a big number, so I'm going to use my calculator. My calculator says it comes out to a nice even 29 for x. But that's only the first blank. What Math 2 always does is it always has these other things. Then what is angle C, and then what is angle D? And so what you'll always have to do almost every single time is to plug it back in. How do I find angle C? The measure of angle C, plug in the numerical value. I bet you can do that in your head. What is 29 plus 10? 39. Figured that you could figure that out. And then you could plug that in here for D, or you can just subtract it from 90 degrees. It's up to you. I'm going to use my calculator. 2 times 29 minus 7. My calculator says 51, and that adds to 90 degrees. So there's my answer for 23. I'm going to stop your notes right there.